I'm glad that you brought that up for clarity. You know, a lot of people gonna watch the show and they're gonna be quick to comment the first thing you say wrong. Okay. So yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up here. Hopefully we get Zay back.
He probably wishes he was a free agent, right? Because he would get paid if he was. But yeah, I think Indiana still has a couple more years left of team control.
Absolutely. Zach, we're gonna move on to the NFL right now. Man, I've been looking forward to this topic in particular. Will the Kansas City Chiefs offseason issues ruin their three-peat? And we have a follow-up question behind that. All right. Which is, who's the biggest threat to the Chiefs in the AFC? Okay. When Zay comes back, I'll let Zay in. Hopefully, I'll see him as I'm doing my tape because I'm about to blow. I'm ready to go. Okay. Listen, Zach, I'm going to just be real with you, man. I'm going to be straight up blunt and honest. The Kansas City Chiefs are a bunch of thugs. They're a bunch of criminals, thugs, whatever you want to call, whatever adjective they are. You know, Rasheed Rice, we all know what happened with him. Okay. But before we even get there, let's acknowledge and remember that Travis Kelce assaulted his head coach in the Super Bowl. A lot of people do that under the rug because they won the championship. But I bet you 100 beans, if they lost that Super Bowl, that would have been the topic of conversation. Okay. He assaulted his head coach, took a page out of his former teammate's book, Tyreek Hill, who shoved an assistant on the Chiefs coaching staff before. Clearly, they have a culture going on over there, the same culture, and one of the reasons probably why Eric Bieniemy can't find a job to save his life. And no shots at Eric Bieniemy, I'm just saying, man. I mean, what's going on? Why can't you get a job, bro? Okay, now you talk about Rasheed Rice and the DWI and the punching of a fan or whatever. All right, then you get to Harrison Butker, and I want to talk about him in his comments for a little bit, right? Because it's not that I don't disagree or I agree. I kind of agree with what he had to say at the commencement graduation, ceremony there where he gave the speech. He talked about women and how they should be aspiring to be wives, mothers, homemakers. And I'm not trying to get too deep in a rabbit hole, but I do think when you look at society, right, the men is stripped from being at the top of the food chain, being the providers. And now it's just harder to create a family because if you ain't making a certain amount of money, these girls do not want you, okay? Real talk. Make sure you stack up on your chicken, fellas, okay? The household has been separated, which is why we have a lot of bastard children. With all due respect, Zach, I'm just keeping it real, okay? I work in the insurance company. I meet families on a day-by-day basis, okay? This generation is cooked. So I do think Harrison Butker makes a valid point. But at the end of the day, him being on the Chiefs is going to create a trickle-down effect of people who hate him for his comments, newfound Chiefs haters, you could say, that don't like the Chiefs now because of his comments. And then you got Travis Kelce, who's been bought by Big Pharma, chipping in with his comments like we care about what Travis Kelce thinks, okay? Then you got the over-promotion of the Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce relationship. There's so many things to hate about this Chiefs team, okay? Then, before we got on the air today, we got word that defensive end Isaiah Buggs, who's bugging, okay, had dogs chained up and tortured. Sky's Michael Vick, his inspiration, okay, torturing dogs. I mean, this has been the offseason of hell when it comes to the Kansas City. I can't even call them Chiefs, thieves. Okay, these guys are criminals, and it's been more than I probably didn't mention. Okay, it's been that bad of an offseason. Now, in regards to how could that affect them going into the year, right? As I'm looking for my guy Zay, we gotta put an AP out. Okay, I do believe that Rasheed Rice, if he gets suspended for half the season, which he should, that's going to tamper with chemistry. Obviously, that's going to be a big loss because if you watch the Chiefs last year, he was a big part in why they won the championship. They had just enough of a short passing game to complement the running game with Isaiah Pacheco and enough defense, a really good defense rather, to win the Super Bowl. Okay? If he's suspended for 6 to 8 games, that's going to tamper with chemistry. I understand they got Marquise Brown, but that chemistry needs to be developed between him and Patrick Mahomes. But the main loss to me is not only about the offseason theatrics, right? And I think it's horrible. But I do think losing a guy like L'Jarius Sneed, a guy that made some game-winning championship plays in the playoffs, stripped Zay Flowers of the football before he crossed the end zone, playing press coverage well, being that guy on the island that could take away a number 1 or 2 wide receiver, that's going to be missed. He went to the Titans, by the way. And I do think when you consider all this that's going on, I'm not saying that it's going to impact them on the field. They have championship experience, right? And we all know the Patriots, right? I'm a Patriots guy. We had a dynasty. We ran through the Deflate Gate, Hate Gate, Spot Gate, and all that. We won championships. But
not to mention a guy, your tight end and what happened to him,
Oh, yeah. Oh, so to my guy, Aaron Hernandez. Okay. Yes. We went through all that. So it can be done. I'm not going to sit here and say that the theatrics is going to impact them on the field. What I'm saying is that the Chiefs are a bunch of thugs that cannot be trusted at all. And who knows what's going to continue to happen from now until week 1. Okay. Can these guys stay out of trouble? Okay. Who knows what's going to happen next? I just think that there's 101 ways to not like the Kansas City Chiefs because they're very bad people.
But Will, do you have an answer for the question? Do you think it's gonna ruin their three-peat?
No, I think I pretty much answered that. I don't think it's gonna. I think if anything, it may. It depends on what happens from now till September, 8 or whatever the season starts. But I do think losing Rasheed Rice, which they probably will for 6 games at least, is definitely going to hinder them in some capacity.
All right. So let me start off by saying this. If I was running the Kansas City Chiefs, if I was Brett Veach, I would cut Isaiah Buggs on the spot immediately, right now. I remember this is a guy at Alabama. He played there, and he was a really good player, but he was drafted in the 6th round in the 2019 draft due to some character concerns. And the Chiefs, based on the offseason they've had, I don't think they should have any patience here. Buggs is a guy that he's not even on the team. He's on the practice squad. And although it's only allegations and he hasn't been charged with anything yet, I think you need to send a message to your locker room that all these issues going on off the field, they just cannot continue as we get closer and closer to the start of the season. This guy Buggs was also a member of the Detroit Lions at this time last year, and Brad Holmes in that operation decided to cut him and move on after he was pretty productive during the 2022 season. And I'm thinking, if Brad Holmes, the same guy who has literally kept every player he has drafted in his 4 years as Lions GM up to this point, every player he's drafted is on the team right now in his tenure, then yeah, if he decides to cut you, you should probably be red flagged. So I would move on from Isaiah Buggs right now on the spot to send a message to the locker room that this behavior cannot be tolerated. But do I think it's going to prevent them from three-peating? I don't. I understand it's very hard to three-peat in the Super Bowl era. As a matter of fact, it's never happened. But if Kansas City doesn't three-peat this season, I don't think we're going to look back and say, oh, it was because of the offseason they just had. No head coach in the NFL is better at coaching and getting the most out of a malcontent than Andy Reid. Will, I know you brought up the Travis Kelce situation and everything that happened in the Super Bowl. When that happened, I thought there was a very good chance Kansas City was going to lose that game. And exactly what you said, the next day we were going to be talking about that as the number one story coming out of the Super Bowl. But Andy Reid, he just pretended like nothing happened, and he was able to keep his head in the game. He was able to keep his team's head in the game and their eyes on the prize. And we know what happened from there. They were able to out-execute San Francisco in a very close game, and they were able to win the Super Bowl. Andy Reid, I hate to go full circle here, but this is the same guy that turned Michael Vick into an MVP candidate his first year out of prison when he returned to the NFL. Now, I also think Rasheed Rice is in for a pretty hefty suspension. What he did was totally wrong. What he did was totally unacceptable. And I think if you're Kansas City, you should expect him to miss at least half the season, pretty significant time. But this is really why they drafted Xavier Worthy from Texas in the first round. And I think he's going to have a really good rookie season. This is the same kid that broke John Ross's all-time record for the fastest 40 time at the combine with a 4.21 40. And even though with him, size is a concern. If you're being compared to John Ross, that's not really a good thing considering how John Ross's NFL career ended up. But when I watched Worthy at Texas, I was impressed how, even though he's a smaller guy, he was able to take some big hits and pop right back up. And I think his game is going to translate really well to the NFL. And I still don't know on that point, like, what were the Buffalo Bills thinking, letting their arch rivals trade up with them in the draft in order to get him, especially when you're Buffalo, like, you needed a wide receiver. That was your number one position of need. I think this kid Worthy is going to be really good. I think there's a chance that he could be like Deshaun Jackson Light playing in that Andy Reid offense. And I think he's going to be right up there with one of the best rookie wide receivers in this class. I also like the addition of Hollywood Brown. I just don't think there's a chance that Kansas City's offense is going to be as pedestrian as it was last year during the regular season before they turned it on in the playoffs. And I just think, like, if you're counting Kansas City out, you should have learned your lesson last year. As long as they have their core group of guys, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, Steve Spagnuolo, as long as those guys are in the mix, then no matter how poor or how lackadaisical this team looks during the regular season, it's going to be very hard for me to count them out until you eventually kill them in the playoffs.
I mean, look, bro, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything here on this show. I'm just going to give it to you how I see it. You know, excluding my notion of the Chiefs being thugs, because they are, when you just look at football and what really they're going up against, it's not only really the offseason theatrics. Now, granted, Zach, it's coming in bunches, bro. We came up with this topic this morning. You sent this topic to me. And lo and behold, we got another incident that came right after that. So it's not far-fetched that things could happen from now until week 1 that could really tamper with the Chiefs season. Okay? So that's not out of the ordinary. But if you're looking at it from football, no team has three-peated. They are up against history. That's their biggest thing right here. Before we look at the matchup and talk about who could potentially be that threat, which we're going to do now in the AFC, they're up against history. How we feel about the offense and who's coming back and who's not coming back and who's going to mix and match and what they got at coach and quarterback and DC. At the end of the day, they're up against history. What they did last year, a lot of people got on me because I called them lucky. Bro, nobody has two-peated before they did since 2003 and 4. Okay? So, excuse me for calling them lucky. This was a team that led the league in drops last year at the end of the regular season. Now, obviously, I don't think they're going to be that bad this year offensively. But at the same time, it goes to show you how things fell into place. Tom Brady said it. He's the GOAT. Nobody knows more football than Tom Brady. Okay? And I would like to say I know football, but I damn sure don't know what Tom Brady knows. And he did an interview. I forgot where, but I saw the interview. Okay? I didn't care who interviewed him. I was like, this is my guy, Tom Brady. When he talks, I listen. So I don't even know who did the interview. I didn't even care about that. He said it. There's a lot of things that has to happen. He basically called the Chiefs lucky. Okay? Because there's a lot of things that have to fall into place. The Ravens choked the game. The Ravens had this amount of turnovers. And don't get me wrong, the Chiefs had some turnovers as well on their own. Self-oriented. They made some mistakes in the Super Bowl, in the AFC Championship. But their mistakes did not make them pay at the end like the other team's mistakes did. Okay? Now, when you come back to this, as we segue, before we segue to who could be that team that knocks them off in the AFC, my point is, no matter what you're talking about off the field and whatnot, on the field and whatnot, they're up against history. It's going to be extremely harder. All right? As hard as it was for them to win these championships, if you think it was, it's going to be 10 times harder to three-peat.
Yeah, and I think that's a big reason. Like, it's literally never been done before in the history of the NFL, in the history of the Super Bowl era. No team has ever three-peated, and I think like that's the challenge they're going up against, right? They're literally trying to do something no one else has ever done before. But to the point you said to start off, like the offseason fields, the offseason, everything that happened off the field, like the season still doesn't start for another few months. And you're right. Like I brought this up to your attention this morning, and a few hours later, we got the news on Bugs. And that's why I would cut him right now. Like, I think if you're the Chiefs management, you have to send a message like, guys, what is going on here? Like, this cannot be continuing. And I think some of it is overblown, like Harrison Butker. Like, I don't think what he did was really that controversial or that bad. He just has an opinion. He gave it at a commencement speech. Not everyone was supposed to hear it. He's just going to move on with his business. And I also would like to give Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes a lot of credit for having his back. Like they basically just said, look, he's allowed to feel however the way he does. He's a great person. He's a great teammate in this building. And if our goal is all the same and that's to win a championship, then it shouldn't be that big of a distraction. But when you have guys like Rasheed Rice getting into trouble for much more serious things and Isaiah Buggs, like those are the concerns. And again, I think you have to send a message. I would cut Isaiah Buggs today. He's got to go. He has no place being on the team. He should have a short leash. He should know that. And I just hope that if they do that, that would send a message to the rest of the locker room. Like, guys, like we can't be messing around. We all have to focus on the task at hand and the goal, and that's making history.
I mean, I just think it's going to come down to how Andy Reid rallies the guys, because right now with Andy Reid, you talked about it. He got assaulted on live television, brushed it off. If these things continue to mount, he can't just brush it off. He has to get command of this locker room. You have Harrison Butker, who made some comments that like I said, I agree with some of the comments, respectfully. A lot of people may not, respectfully, okay? But that's politics, right? He said your opinion, whatever. But you have the NFL that's trying to grab the woman base. Basically, they've been trying to grab the woman base. That's why when Deshaun Watson got suspended, the NFL tried to hit them with the hammer, because they want to drag that base of the female base. That's why they're going ham with this Taylor Swift coverage, because she's bringing in a large audience from the female, woman base. And you have that dynamic, ironically, on this team where a lot of women are watching the Chiefs, therefore watching football now. And you have Harrison Butker with his comments that it can be interpreted against women. To me, it's all about perspective, but it could be interpreted like you're against women working and making money and this, that, and the third. Things could be very problematic, if you ask me. I'm not sure if you want to respond to that real quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, and it's definitely come with some controversy. But man, I think if you ask Andy Reid and you ask the people in that building, like Harrison Butker could say whatever he wants, like
as long as he's making the kicks, right?
Right, and he's made some big kicks. I still think back to that 13 seconds game against Buffalo. That wasn't an easy kick he made after the Chiefs executed to get into field goal range to send the game into overtime. Didn't he hit from like 57 in the Super Bowl? He's a really good kicker. So as long as he doesn't say anything, that's literally like offensive or racist or stupid, then I think they're good with him saying whatever he wants, man. And they had his back. Like, I give them a lot of credit, because they could have thrown him under the bus, Reid and Mahomes, and they could have made the situation ugly. But they said, no, he's a good guy. He's allowed to feel whatever he wants, and as long as our goal is on the task at hand, we won't have a problem with it.
I mean, it should be like that, right? Like, they don't need no police, right? In this situation, freedom of speech. But all right, Zach, before we talk about who in the AFC can stop them, I have bad news. Okay, Zay is going to be out for the rest of the show, technical issues, but it's going to be me and you finishing up the show. Zach, let's go. Who's the biggest AFC threat to stop the Chiefs?
All right, well, I think this is a super fascinating question, because there are a lot of super appealing options when you look at the AFC. We know how many great quarterbacks are in this conference, especially guys that are pretty young, guys that could break out. And this is a super fascinating topic. But I'm going to answer this question with the team that we actually have evidence is capable of going into Kansas City and beating the Chiefs in a big spot. And for me, that's Joe Burrow and the Bengals. I'm going to label them as Kansas City's biggest threat, because I think really the only thing standing in the way of this pick is Joe Burrow and his health, because when Joe Burrow is on the field, the Bengals win. Now, we know there's some questions with this team entering the summer, right? Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both are looking for new contracts, and they haven't reported to OTAs yet. Trey Hendrickson, their star pass rusher, he requested a trade in the offseason, right? He's looking for a new deal. But I think this team, to me, has some last dance vibes. They didn't trade anyone this offseason because they wanted to go all in for a Super Bowl this season. They know their window is right now. And I understand that their defense, they took a big step back last year. But I think a big reason for that was the loss of both of their starting safeties, Jesse Bates and Von Bell. That, to me, is such a big part, I should say, of that Lou Anarumo scheme, right? Having safeties that know exactly what to do at all of the right times. And we know their defense was a big reason why they were able to go into Arrowhead Stadium and beat the Chiefs in that AFC Championship game. They had Mahomes flustered. I love the addition of Geno Stone from the division rival Ravens. This is a guy that led the NFL in interceptions last season. And they also brought back Von Bell, who was starting at safety when they made both those deep playoff runs. So they bring him back after a one-year absence. You hope those guys make a difference. I also really liked the draft pick of Ardarius Mims from Georgia, the offensive lineman. He's in like a similar mold to Broderick Jones, who the Steelers just took. Like, Mims didn't play a ton of college football. He only played in 12 games at Georgia, but he has great size and measurables that I think will be worth the upside if that pick works out. I also really like the addition of Zach Moss. He looked great in Indianapolis last year, and I think that duo of him and the youngster Chase Brown, second-year pro out of Illinois, I think that's a major upgrade over Joe Mixon. Like, I don't think they're going to miss Mixon at all. I think that's an upgrade, both those two guys. And they made some, like, under-the-radar, low-key moves when it comes to veteran signings. They brought in Trent Brown from the Raiders to really assure up that offensive line, give them offensive line depth. They brought in Mike Gesicki at tight end. Sheldon Rankins, former Jet, former first-round pick on the defensive line. I just like these under-the-radar, low-key veteran signings. And I'll just say, like, I think Baltimore got worse, and they still have a ton to prove in terms of winning in the playoffs. I think the same thing could be said about Buffalo. And Houston, they're just a little too trendy for my liking. I need to see them do it one more year. So I'm going to go with the established quarterback and the established team that we've seen go into Kansas City in the playoffs and beat them before. I'm going to go with Joe Burrow and the Bengals as the AFC's biggest threat to stop Kansas City.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I'm going with the guy who has done it before. The guy that's 2-0 against Patrick Mahomes in the regular season. A guy that split with Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs despite having a leaky line that's now revamped. I'm talking about the offensive line here. That's now revamped. That's going to give that guy protection. Obviously, got to stay healthy. Okay, we got to make sure that injury-prone narrative is just an aberration. Okay, obviously, they need Joe Burrow in order to win anything. You also got the secondary that's revamped. You know, they're improving in the secondary. I like what they got going on there. I think they're going to be improved from last year. I like their defensive line. I like the fact that they got Sam Hubbard, and also Trent Hendrickson, I believe is his name. Henderson, excuse me. They got that guy on the line to give them a nice 1-2 punch there on the line on the defense. So I really do think that they have all the weapons. They have the quarterback to really go toe-to-toe with the Chiefs. You know, you got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and I know there's a lot going on. I believe both of those brothers have not been present at OTAs, and I understand that T. Higgins requested a trade and all that, but unfortunately for him, and fortunately for the Bengals, you have something called a franchise tag, which is team control. So unless they wake up one morning and decide to trade T. Higgins will be a Chief. Excuse me, not a Chief. He will be a Bengals. Okay, you don't want him on the Chiefs now, because now they automatically eliminated there. But if they can get their guys to just buy in, you know, with all the distractions that's going on, because they got distractions of their own going on. It's just mainly financial. The Chiefs is another ball game. Okay, if they could get their guys to lock in and chase the bigger picture here, which is winning a Super Bowl, they should be the team to beat the Kansas City Chiefs.
One other point I'll make, which I don't think a lot of people are talking about, is, you know, people forget the AFC North had 3 playoff teams last year, and that was not the Bengals included in that. The Ravens won the division. Cleveland was a wild card. They came in second. Pittsburgh was also a wild card. They came in third. So Cincinnati is going to be playing a last place schedule, and I think that's huge. Like, I'm looking at their schedule right now. There aren't a lot of challenging games in here. Sure, they go to Kansas City week 2. That's not an impossible game to win. We know Kansas City has had hiccups during the regular season, especially early. Like, they play the Ravens twice. Of course, that's a division rival. But again, I think the Bengals are just the better team right now. They play the Eagles, which is a tough game. But looking at some of these games, like they play the Patriots week 1 at home. That should be a win. They play the Commanders. Like, bro, Will, listen to the quarterbacks they play in their first 4 games. Jacoby Brissett and the Patriots. Then they play the Chiefs. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes, that's tough. And then they play Jaden Daniels and the Commanders. And then they play Bryce Young and the Panthers. So 3 of their first 4 games are against Brissett, Jaden Daniels, and Bryce Young. You know, they should feast right there. They also play the Giants. They play the Raiders. They play the Chargers. They play the Titans. They play the Broncos. Like, I don't think this is a challenging schedule at all. And I think they're really going to take advantage of the fact that they came in last place in this division last year, and they get that bump of a last place schedule.
Yeah, I think that's another, X factor here is the fact that you do get that bump in the schedule for being in last place. So your schedule is a little bit easier. And I just think that, when you watch these 2 teams last year, and not the Chiefs I'm talking about here, the Bengals and the Ravens was a good team all year, but they're a regular season team. I think they've shown us that too many times that they are a regular season team. A lot of people forget that before they lost to the Chiefs, in which they blew that game away, they had no business losing that game. Clearly with a better team. And even Chris Jones said that after they won the championship. Okay. Even in that Houston Texans game, I mean, it was looking, the stadium was quiet at halftime. It wasn't until they had a big return that really gave them that spark and they won that game. They're a regular season team. They still got a lot of maturing to do in the playoffs. As far as the Bengals, though, at one point last year, we all know they got off to that rocky start because Joe Burrow had that hamstring injury and he really couldn't move. He was a lame duck in that pocket, but they started to gain some momentum. They beat the 49ers on the road and they started to win. We even started to put Joe Burrow in the MVP category, despite being 0-2 to start off the year. Okay? So we know that the Bengals, when healthy, can be dominant as the Chiefs are. Okay? Now, unfortunately for Joe Burrow, he's been hurt. So it's been Patrick Mahomes' world that we are living in. But when Joe Burrow is healthy, you got to share that love. It's not Patrick Mahomes' world. It's Patrick Mahomes versus Joe Burrow. Who wins it all.
Yeah, well, before we move on, did you have like any other teams you maybe wanted to mention as like an honorable mention or anyone that just missed the cut?
If there's an honorable mention that I could throw out there, it would probably be, believe it or not, this is tough. It would probably be, I want to go, I don't know, Zach, you take it first and then I'll think about it.
All right, yeah. I'll give you some time to think about it. Again, I'll repeat. I agree with you. The Ravens were never an option here. They have to prove it for me to believe it first. Buffalo, I think, is going to take a major step back. I think they're more likely to miss the playoffs than get back to an AFC championship game. Houston is the trendy pick. I'm sure a lot of people would answer them. CJ Stroud going into his second year, he's going to be an MVP candidate. They add Stephon Diggs. They just locked up Nico Collins to a nice little extension, which I don't think, the Bengals are too happy about considering they have to pay both their guys. But I never considered them. I'm going to give you 2 teams that are a little bit off the radar, though, that probably not a lot of people would see coming, but I think both these teams are in for big seasons. Number 1 is the Colts. I think Anthony Richardson is in for a monster season. I think he's in for that second-year quarterback breakout. I think Shane Steichen would be my pick for Coach of the Year right now. I'm a big fan of what he does. I love the draft pick of Latu. I think he's really going to help their defense. Jonathan Taylor is still in the mix. I think he hasn't been as good as we've expected him to be the last few years, but I wonder if now that he got his money, now that he got his contract situation taken care of, I could see him having a nice bounce back year now that his mind is just squarely on football. They have a lot of nice young receivers. Josh Downs is a guy that I expect to take a step forward. Michael Pittman, they were able to keep him. His contract was up at the end of last year. They locked him up to a nice long-term deal. And I'm just betting on Anthony Richardson's talent, man. I think he's the real deal. And I think with Shane Steichen, I think the Colts are one of my big sleepers in the AFC. And then, I had to mention it, man. Like, I'm just going to put my money where my mouth is. If Aaron Rodgers is healthy and he's anything close to the guy that we've seen in Green Bay with this Jets roster, I think they should be right in the mix as well. I just think the upside of this team, if everything goes right, is a team that's going to be in the mix. And I mentioned this last week, Aaron Rodgers, it seems that whenever you doubt him, that's when he's at his best. I'm expecting him to be right at the top of the comeback player of the year race. So those were the two teams that were a little bit under the radar that I'll mention as honorable mention, the Colts and the Jets.
Yeah, I think if I had to give a secondary team, I really can't even call it under the radar because I think people are going to go here. A lot of people are going to go here, but it's mainly for different reasons. And that's probably the Texans. Not because they have all this talent, not because I'm just automatically sipping the CJ Stroud as a top 5 quarterback Kool-Aid. Now, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. We got our quarterback rankings. I can't deliver that right now for you, right? I'm not over zealous about, Stephon Diggs coming to the team and he's going to do the same exact thing he did on Buffalo when he first came over there. It's not really mainly about that and all the weapons they have. It's about coaching continuity. What the Chiefs have benefited from in the Mahomes era that nobody wants to talk about is coaching continuity. Having Steve Spagnuolo there, okay, not having him leave for another job to be a head coach. For a minute, Eric Bieniemy was there, okay, before he obviously left out of Andy Reid's shadow. Having Andy Reid as well, coaching continuity. You got Bobby Slowick, who's the offensive coordinator for the Texans, returning. That's huge because if they lost him, CJ Stroud would have to learn another offense. So you have continuity there at coaching. D'Amico Ryans is back. Okay, I do believe that the coaching continuity to go along with the talent is what's going to be a big thing for the Texans this year and why they could potentially dethrone the Chiefs. It's not mainly to do about the talent. When you look at the Bills, they have Joe Brady that's coming in, who he came in the middle of the season. He didn't even implement his full offense yet. They got to gel a little bit more, him and Josh Allen. Plus, the wide receiving room has to gain that continuity with Josh Allen. You look at the Chargers, you have a new head coach in Jim Harbaugh. So as much as I wanted to go there, I thought about going there. I still think they can be a player. I still think they could be a playoff team. So when you talk about coaching continuity, I think the Texans are returning that, and that's why that would be my second team.
Yeah, and they're going to be the trendy pick, right? Like, I think if you ask this question to 100 football fans, you'd probably have like 25 say the Ravens, 25 say the Bengals, maybe even 15 to 20 say Houston, because what CJ Stroud did as a rookie last year, it was the best rookie season ever. Like, we never seen a rookie come into the league just like that and immediately elevate his game. The Diggs addition, they also brought in Mixon from the Bengals. Again, I think that's actually a good thing for Cincinnati. I love the running back duo they got, Zach Moss and Chase Brown. I think both those guys are going to be big-time players. Chase, Higgins, man, I just hope Joe Burrow can stay healthy because, as we've both said, when he does, this team wins.
Please like and subscribe for all the up-to-date content. You've been slinging shows left and right, slinging content left and right. Please don't miss anything. If you do, like, subscribe, leave a comment, or leave a question, something you may want to answer, something you may have. All ideas are great ideas. Nothing's a dumb question.